This week, stealing your Tesla, British Airways hack, Equifax long list of mistakes, Windows 7 support. Yes, you can still get that. Oops, I forgot to encrypt your chats. I can see your browser history, if you're Trend Micro, Tor browsers, VPNs, and Coldfusion. Jason Wood from Paladin Security joins us for expert commentary on how governments are committing to fighting encryption, and tech companies will have to cooperate. All that and more on this edition of Hack Naked News. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show that brings you the security news each week. And despite popular belief, we do wear pants. It's Hack Naked News.
The breach was huge news at the time.
Linux monitoring tool.
List of affected devices. You can check out the link in the show notes.
Ars Technica is reporting that hackers have cracked the Nintendo Switch this week.
Tracking people's locations and stuff like that.
You'll want to be rolling out updates if you're using Lenovo hardware. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending your assets? Have you penetration tested your public assets? Start 2018 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting at blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night. Welcome, everyone, to Hack Naked News, episode 188 for September 11th, 2018. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, coming at you live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. A couple of quick announcements. Join us for a webcast with Logarithm, where I will be presenting my presentation, tips and tricks for defending enterprises using open source tools. This webcast will be held September 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure you register for it at securityweekly.com/logarithm, where I'll talk about the kind of the double-edged sword of using open source tools, places where it makes sense, places where it doesn't, and my recommendations for ones that I think are most effective in enterprises today. Also, that was the only announcement. So that was an announcement. That was the only announcement, which means now that really wasn't the only announcement because I made an announcement about announcements. And now, the security news for this week. How to steal a Tesla Model S in seconds. This came from ZDNet, was the source who reported that researchers at KU Leuven University, if I'm saying that wrong, I apologize to Leuven University in Belgium, discovered that key fobs, which can be used, of course, to unlock vehicles. Thanks. I didn't actually realize that's what they were used for, but I'm glad they clarified. They came with poor cryptographic and encryption standards, as reported by Wired. By using roughly $600 in radio and PC equipment, the team was able to read signals from the Tesla key fob, clone the key, and open the car and drive away in no time at all. And if you own a Tesla, you will be able to get a new key fob if your vehicle was vulnerable, as Tesla worked with their supplier to boost the cryptographic standards of key fobs from June, and a corresponding software update will allow owners of vehicles built prior this month to switch to a new key fob if they so choose, which I highly recommend if you do, in fact, own a Tesla, as I'm kind of jealous because I want a Tesla too. British Airways breach shows that hackers are fine-tuning e-commerce attacks. The baggage claim site that contained a JavaScript library that sent all the data on the screen to the URL baways.com. The hackers exploited a flaw that they could obtain a copy of the data while the victim was sending that personal and financial information to the airline without realizing that anything was wrong. We speculated yesterday on Application Security Weekly this was likely a cross-site scripting vulnerability due to some kind of third-party JavaScript library that was handling the data poorly. This story got a ton of press. I'm not sure why, because it's really not all that interesting, but every news site just had to talk about the British Airways hack. Usually that happens when it's a slow news week, kind of like this week. The U.S. government has released a post-mortem report on the Equifax hack. This was an interesting read this week. When you read the article, you'll understand that Equifax made a lot of mistakes. Some of the information in there is new. Some of it is stuff that we already had been made aware of. However, what I thought was interesting that I'll highlight here is that Equifax IT administrators circulated the advisory on the Apache Struts vulnerability on an internal mailing list. Unbeknownst to its IT administrators, the mailing list was out of date and did not include all of its systems administrators, indirectly leading to an incomplete patch of Equifax's servers. This underscores the point that security is not all about products, but more about communication and process, which was just one of the mistakes. It's a fantastic read. Go to wiki.securityweekly.com. You can find it in the show notes for episode 188 of this show. Microsoft extends security patch support for some Windows 7 users. As the article states, I should say, Microsoft is offering an olive branch to companies taking too long to upgrade from Windows 7. The company revealed last week it will provide security updates for another 3 years as it tries to help business customers migrate to Windows 10, but they'll have to pay for that privilege. So they'll have to pay to extend support as Microsoft helps them, but they have to pay for Microsoft's help. I'm not sure how much help you'll get in migrating to Windows 10 other than maybe a couple of articles about why you should migrate from Windows 7 to Windows 10. I'm not really sure. Paying something is what I would describe as an olive branch, as that was a direct quote from the article, because you have to pay for it. I don't know. Also, does this encourage bad behavior? Will companies drag their feet updating because they can just pay for a pass? The larger question is, does this really matter to your security posture and your overall risk from a security perspective? All good questions and topics to discuss inside your respective organizations with various teams, such as management and IT administrators and sysadmins. The Keybase browser extension weakness, Keybase browser extension has a weakness that was discovered this week. If you're using Keybase, I'm not sure many people are, but again, it was a slow news week, so I thought I'd include it. Be aware, Keybase users, of encryption limitation in the browser plugin. Behind the scenes, every message sent via the browser chat is passed to the local desktop app, which is the bit that does the encryption. However, according to the researcher, messages are unencrypted as they are sent to the app, hardly end-to-end encryption, which means there might be clear text floating around in between the browser and the local app, which they are working on fixing. So anytime you see that encryption is there, it might not always be. Trend Micro apologizes after Mac apps found scooping up users' browser history. Browser history is kind of a big deal for privacy, but could also reveal internal servers and internal applications. Quoted from the article, Trend Micro has confirmed reports that some of its Mac consumer products were silently sending users' browser history to its servers, and apologized for it to customers for any concern they might have felt. I'm sure some people's browser history had them with a great deal of concern that they were left with, and we'll just leave it at that. However, an advisory on its own blog to the well-known internet security firm maintained that all data collected was safe and at no point was compromised. So we silently collected your browser history, but it's okay. You can trust us because we'll keep it safe, even though we collected it without telling you. Yeah, I'm not sure I buy that in any case. Zerodium, who's a broker of exploits and vulnerabilities, drops an exploit for version 7 of the anonymous Tor browser. I find Tor browsers to be riddled with bugs and vulnerabilities. Bug broker Zerodium is quoted in the article saying they released word of a flaw in the Tor browser that would potentially allow an attacker to bypass security protections and execute malicious code in the supposedly secure internet system. Not sure what they mean by the supposedly secure internet system. I mean, the internet is largely... Anyway. So if you're using the Tor browser, my advice is to not. ProtonVPN and NordVPN have flaws that open the door to privilege escalation. Here again, trusting a VPN service, similarly to trusting a Tor browser, is difficult, especially given the latest round of vulnerabilities. From the article, the vulnerabilities disclosed this month are related to a critical bug previously discovered by Versprite in April 2018, CVE 2018-10169, which affected both services. It allowed the attacker with access to the target PC to use a specially crafted malicious OpenVPN configuration file, which the service would use to execute a user's VPN connection instead of the legitimate file. Thus, it offered an adversary privilege escalation. Adobe has patched 6 critical flaws in ColdFusion. Are people still using raise your hand if you're using ColdFusion. I think there's other options that are better out there, though I'm curious, as Adobe's releasing updates for it, which must mean they still have customers using it, what the use case is for ColdFusion. In any case, Adobe has released patches that fix 6 critical vulnerabilities in its ColdFusion product that could lead to arbitrary code execution. The flaws impact Adobe's ColdFusion product, the company's commercial web application development platform. It's been impacted on the 2016 Update 6 and earlier, and the July 12, 2018 release of ColdFusion, as well as ColdFusion 11 and 14 and earlier versions. Sounds like a lot of, if you're running ColdFusion, you definitely want to pay attention to that. And with that, we will take a short break and come back with expert commentary with none other than Jason Wood. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/HNN. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Welcome back, everyone, to Hack Naked News. There's no other announcements on my teleprompter. On demand, securityweekly.com/on demand, and there will be a health and mental health and wellness seminar being held at DerbyCon, so make sure you go check that out as well. Is it derbycon.com/wellness? I think. If not, go there and...
Yes.
It is. Okay. If it's not, you could look at the DerbyCon 404 page. But anyway, it is that. So, Jason Wood from Paladin Security, welcome to the program today.
Hey, Paul. Good.
What's going on? We're going to talk about governments and encryption. Yay.
We are, again. So, yeah, we've talked about this a number of times already. Mostly U.S.-centric because, well, most of us Security Weekly folks are in the U.S. I think everybody is.
Well, no, most. Jason, we reach over 200 countries. I'm just saying.
Well, the folks that are listening, absolutely. I was thinking more of the folks that are, on the podcast itself. But we do have.
Yes, we are. Yes, most of us are.
But so this was an interesting bit of news. Like I said, we've talked about this in the U.S. focus, but I wanted to highlight this article I found on Security Boulevard because it is more international, much more international. So, and it's pretty relevant to the debate about encryption and government's role in having access to it. So 2 weeks ago, the Five Eyes government, which is an interesting name, which is basically the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, met to discuss areas of cooperation and information sharing. And this actually, the term Five Eyes, if you hadn't heard of that before, dates back to 1943 with intelligence sharing agreement that was created between the governments and has met continually since, through the years since then. And it continues to evolve as time progresses. Anyhow, they met to discuss areas of concern. And one of the topics that they discussed, lo and behold, was the widespread use of encryption and its impact on intelligence and law enforcement. And there were 2 documents that I'd recommend folks go out and read. I've got the links to them in the show notes. They were published, at least as part of the results of this meeting. The first was titled the 5-Country Ministerial 2018 Official Communique. which is just kind of a statement of what they were talking about and has a section on encryption in it. And then the second was the statements on principles of access to evidence and encryption, much more specific. The official communique, like I said, had included a paragraph discussing encryption itself. And they made a comment in it where they say governments have no interest in weakening encryption mechanisms, but then goes on to state that they need to have access to unencrypted data, that it needs to be reversible to governments. So really, to my mind, if we're going to make it reversible to governments, then we're essentially weakening encryption.
I agree.
The second one, like I said, is much more specific to the encryption topics, and it is really kind of interesting, some of the statements they have in there. They just start off by making their case why they need access to data, and they list all of the terrible crimes that folks are committing and hiding with encryption. And I'm not trying to make the argument that we shouldn't go after those folks and that encryption is not going to complicate enforcement mechanisms. I just think there are more issues that need to be considered beyond with encryption than just that. And they basically lay out their case saying, hey, by linking access to encrypted data to established law enforcement techniques to perform searches, such as go get a warrant, search your car, search your house, or your office, what have you. But they essentially go out and lay down an ultimatum towards the end of this. They say that should governments continue to encounter impediments to lawful access to information necessary to aid in the protection of the citizens of our countries, we may pursue technological enforcement, legislative, or other measures to achieve lawful access. Basically, the paragraph before that, they said, hey, technology companies, we got an idea. Why don't you, on your own, come up with a way to give us access to encrypted data? But if you don't, then they have this statement here about if you continue to impede access, we're going to force you to it. And obviously, there are a number of different concerns that we would have with this. I mean, one, governments have been shown to have issues where they leak sensitive data, and certainly this type of access or means of access would be one area where they'd be targeted. But one thing that I thought was interesting, because this includes 5 different governments that are seeking to compel access to data, the tech companies are going to be focused fighting 5 different countries, and that's just these countries, right? We have pressure from other countries who want access to data. And once one of the tech companies gets forced, let's say with Australia, to give them access to the data, then the other countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, et cetera, we could turn around and obviously say, well, you did it for Australia, why not for us? Plus, the technology just gets deployed out there, and the internet doesn't really stop at boundaries real well. So anyhow, I think this is a bit of a concern. We're already seeing the first round of legislative action on this. Australia has a law that's currently being debated to require access to encrypted data. It's being debated. It has not been signed into law. I think despite the intent of these countries, this is going to be a little bit of a Pandora's box. Essentially, they're saying we don't mind encryption as long as we have access to the data. However, at some point, other countries that maybe are less more on the adversarial list of these of the Five Eyes are going to start pushing for access to it as well. And so you're going to have China and Russia and more who are going to say, well, you did it for these guys. It's time for you to give it to us if you want to do business here. And once that happens, there's going to be more news headlines, and the same politicians that were pushing to require this access are going to be screaming because somebody that they feel is an oppressive government is getting access to confidential data, and activists are being attacked, or business secrets are at risk. The only thing I could see here with this, because this is a multinational thing, and like Paul said, we have folks in over 200 countries, you were saying,
Yep.
Paul?
Mhm.
Get out there and make your voice known inside of your own countries. Talk to or letters, whatever it is, to send off to your representatives, be they in Parliament or Congress or whatever your form of government is, and let them know what your thoughts on this are. Point out the issues that they can be opened up via this. The politicians are going to be getting information that may not be a complete picture, and so as us as concerned citizens, I think it's our responsibility to get out there, make our voices known. I know I'm already writing my representatives to give my opinion on this. Definitely a concern here. I think once one country forces, let's say, Apple to bend to their will, then it's going to be pretty much game over as far as preventing governments from accessing any of your data.
And Jason, this is a balance that we have to strike between privacy and security. And I think we saw that at the recent DEF CON conference at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, right? They were presumptuous in assuming that the attendees would be willing to give up some of their privacy for the sake of security. And we've certainly seen a lot of examples of that going horribly wrong in the past. And this seems like a continuation of that, where governments or the authority deem it necessary to sacrifice your privacy in order to protect the greater good from security threats. And this is going to constantly be a balancing act.
Yeah, and there's not, as I'm thinking through it, I mean, I don't know how good of an answer it is to some of these things. One, I expect it to be a cat and mouse game. Fine, you implemented the new method of encryption. I'm going to use the older version that doesn't have your access to it.
Right.
Obviously, that's a problem with things like TLS or whatnot. If something was built into HTTPS, for example, but as far as peer-to-peer type of encryption, you can just sidestep that. But we may end up finding a point where we just have to assume that even if we've got things encrypted, people are listening to everything we're saying. So I don't know. The governments are pushing for it and they're not letting go. So it's going to be kind of a battle here.
Awesome. Well, Jason, thank you so much for appearing on this episode of Hack Naked News. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.